What's up, guys? Elijah Schuyler here, owner and supervising broker of Venue Real Estate. And back in the studio this week. It was fun to get out and film my last week's episode outside when the weather was nice. Now this week, there's a little inclement weather, rainy, a little windy, so moved back into the studio today to record today's video. And we've been talking about the process of what does it look like to build thriving community. If you haven't seen the last few videos, I encourage you to go back and watch some of those. But today, we're building onto this ongoing conversation of what does it look like to build thriving community and adding the aspect of exercising both sides of empathy. Venue Real Estate's mission statement is building thriving community by brokering properties through collaborative commerce. So in order to engage that with you, it has to be an understanding, a shared meaning of what does it mean to build thriving community. I think one of the difficult aspects, the hurdles to jump over in building thriving community is advocating for the needs of one party without being offended by another. If you work with older people and you advocate for their needs and their rights, you'll have a tendency to be offended by youth. If you advocate for the needs of youth and young people, you have a very strong chance of being offended by the elderly, and on, that if you advocate for the rich, you'll be offended by the poor. If you advocate for those who are working class, you'll be offended by those who are independently wealthy, and vice versa. The balance of that then in advocating for every member of a community equally is the ability to engage conversation with a balanced empathy. Now, many of us are very aware of the side of compassion, that is to share with others in suffering. And compassion is often expressed within contexts where the person expressing compassion doesn't have direct access or involvement within the suffering of the person that they're reaching out to. That compassion is the process of suffering with others through a proactive empathy. Now, we're all very familiar with that context, but on the other side of empathy is also an expression of empathy towards others who are experiencing success or thriving or benefit or joys or pleasure that you don't have access to, but that you share with them in their joy, even while being outside of it. I think this is so key in moving forward in building thriving community because it invites emotional flexibility to be able to go back and forth between individual members of a society, gathering the things that cause suffering and difficulty for a specific person or group of people, and then carrying that across the line to celebrate with other people who are not in that context, but have resources and access to benefits that others don't. And to be able to promote those across that line of division, to present the opportunity to allow resources to flow one to another in thriving community. Now, as you engage that thought process, it's very easy to default to large extremes, that there's locals and there's newcomers, there's those who are the working class and there's the independently wealthy. That those are very large, broad strokes within community and have a tendency to be very separated. If you think about it, locals and newcomers both have areas of suffering and difficulty that the other is not privy to or have access to. Within locals who are, 5th, 6th, 7th generation Bozemanites, that there is a process of grieving that is undergoing as they see a town that they've long loved in its size and its connectivity and similarity and familiarity that is slowly changing as more and more people are moving to our area. This is a real area of suffering, and there's truly the stages of grief that people go through in as much as people say goodbye to a loved one who passes away. Now, people who are moving to the area that are so in love with Bozeman and its culture and the mountains and everything that it has to offer, coming here with great joy, and have a hard time engaging in the compassion of locals who are grieving the loss and the change of their beloved town. Likewise, though, just across the gap for those who are moving into the area as newcomers, that they have a great deal of suffering and difficulty that they deal with as well. That as they leave areas of living that have been home and familiar for however long that they've been there, that they're letting go of all of those things and they're undertaking to jump into a new culture and a new area. And that as they merge into the Bozeman area, they often experience exclusion, that they're held outside of local community, and that they often walk around with a cloud over their head, that they're the ones who are ruining our perfect town and that they're the problem. And there's often that stigma that follows newcomers around that they have to deal with, that is a very real suffering on newcomers' side. Now, vice versa, beyond suffering, there's also joys and pleasures that each have access to that the others do not. That locals who have been in Bozeman for 5, 6, 7 generations have a depth and a breadth of history and tradition and connection and memories that are so enjoyable, so beautiful, that newcomers will never be able to access. You can't go back in time and build 7 generations of connection and community. So locals have access to joys and pleasures and connections and traditions and insights that newcomers never will. And vice versa, that many of those who are moving to the area who are newcomers have a way of life and access to wealth and position and privilege that many of those who live in Bozeman, who are longstanding locals, do not have access to. In this context, then, understanding the sufferings and difficulties of locals and newcomers, as well as the joys of both, that this middle line of connection that creates individual experiences and accesses and joys and fears and tears, that this middle line is mediated by a balanced communication in empathy. Now, my practice of business and being a community member here in Bozeman is to pursue my clients and my community members with proactivity to discover their areas of pleasure and pain and their goals and their visions in moving forward, in making progress within both of those areas and serving them with the full resources that I have at my disposal. In that context of exercising a balanced empathy within community conversations, then it empowers me to be able to sit with people who may be in the midst of very difficult situations and suffering, and then to merge across the gap into contexts of people who have joys and pleasures that I don't have access to, but to take those insights across the gap to those who have resources and strengths and present them in such a way that celebrates their access to joy and pleasure and resources, such that it provides an opportunity to flow to those who have needs and vice versa. Now, aside from that ability to have a balanced empathy within community conversations, an emotional and mental flexibility to be able to rejoice with those who rejoice and to mourn with those who mourn, parties have a tendency to just merge off into isolation with people that they understand, that they like people who are like them. And in that isolation and that separation, we never merge into our synergistic connection of diversity at peace with itself, moving in a common direction of community. If you want to hear more about my real estate practice and what I'm up to, reach out to me at the contact information provided at this end of this video. I'd love to meet up with you, tell you more about what I'm up to, and hear about what you're up to as well. Hopefully you guys are having a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.